Howdy, folks, and this is Chris White, and you're listening to Basic Business Advice. I'm here today with Dr. Katherine Kimble, Kimble, PhD, ESQ. Kate is a partner here at the firm with me and practices in Eastern Ohio. Recently, though, she did get her PhD and did her dissertation, and I don't know that you went out to be hooded. Did you go out to be hooded?
I didn't. I was in North Carolina on vacation during hooding.
Did they send it to you at least?
I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, are you going to wear it for Halloween one year?
Sure.
Kate, you've been with the firm now for 5-6 years?
Coming up on 6.
It's coming up on 6 years with us here. And she's a resident of Harrison County, Ohio, and she grew up there, and that's her base of operations when it comes to her practice. But she also goes down to Monroe County in Woodsfield and runs probably the largest geographic practice area for the firm, but the least populated. So I think at last census count, Harrison County had 14,000 people in it.
I think so. I was just talking to someone about this a few days ago, and Harrison and Monroe County, both of them are in the 5 least populated counties in the state.
Yeah.
So bottom 5, both of them are in there.
I think if we were in Noble County, we might be at the very bottom at that point in time.
It might have been in the bottom 5 also.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you service an interesting population base, and let's talk about that because I want to know your motivations. You and I have talked about this personally before, but they're in a lower population base. You've got a lot of people that are usually concentrated in villages, and then a smattering of people out across farmland. You know, you have a bison farm, you've got multiple hilltop farms that are out in that area, a lot of open land. And then you've got Eques, you've got Woodsfield, you've got these small little population centers that concentrate everybody. And what we are finding as a firm is it's not attracting a lot of practitioners back. You've had some open, in fact, public positions in the county that lawyers would have traditionally filled that had stayed open for a while because it's not attracting back enough people. Given the fact that our observation is these markets, these communities are not attracting back attorneys, why did you go back? Why did you go back home to a small county, small population, and why do you practice there?
Sure. Those are all great questions. So I didn't have like a straight path to practice, really. So like you mentioned, the PhD stuff, that's really where I even started being interested in law, was in that program. So it was a law psychology program where you got a PhD and a JD at the same time. And they're kind of unusual. And so that was interesting to me. But once I finished my law degree, and I mean, I was able to leave and still work on my dissertation. I didn't have to stay there. So I started looking around, and I actually had a like research job that was a lot of statistics and more like a psychologist kind of job. But I worked from home. And so I I actually lived with my husband and I, and our oldest 2 daughters lived with my parents then when we first moved back here. So I would sit in their house outside Eques, like on a farm, working for courts in like New Mexico and Utah and the whole state of West Virginia. And I really enjoyed that work and that job, but it was, I don't know, it felt kind of odd that I'm sitting in Eques and there was all this need everywhere. And that wasn't what I was doing then.
Right.
So that's when I started looking around, and you were the first person I met from White Law Office in Eques.
And you still came. I mean, it's amazing after even that.
So that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't like a straight path. But I did feel like I needed to be there. So, and part of that is for the reasons that you said, that people don't come back. I really liked growing up there. When people talk about how it's so lightly populated, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I tell them I just like space,
Yeah.
like I want to spread out and have some room. So that's nice. And there aren't a lot of counties in Ohio that are really quite like that. So I felt like that was like, that's home, and I wanted to be there and with people there. And so I don't know, it just felt like the right fit for that and to be there. And the need is definitely there. I mean, for all the reasons you said.
Talk
too.
about that need for a second, because I don't know that that's completely evident that you can think conceptually, oh, there are legal needs inside of communities. But what does it look like in a rural community where you don't have a lot of practitioners? What does that need look like?
Sure. So if you think about all types of legal need, there's, I mean, every person could use something. Even if it's transactional things like somebody's buying a house or selling a house or needing a will set up or things that, I mean, most people do sometime in their lives. Those needs are there. And as the attorney population has aged or retired or not come back once they go away for school and don't move back to places like Harrison and Monroe County, people are needing to go other places that are much farther away for those kinds of services that are really just like basic legal needs. And that's not even talking about lawsuits and like all of the things that usually people don't wish will happen to them, but do. So those services are definitely there and needed too. And it's a lot harder or more difficult for people to get them. They end up having to go somewhere else. So.
And that was one of the things that when we first, before we met you, we were actually in Woodsfield and we had taken over for there. We had people driving 2-3 hours to come see us. And the concept of that was just mind boggling to us because they were bypassing other population centers. They were bypassing other attorneys to come see us. Now, that was centralized around the niche market of oil and gas that we were servicing largely at that time in southeastern Ohio. But still, part of the things that we saw was there is going to be a vacuum. And we know, worst case scenario, that some of these counties could lose their local court systems if they don't have enough people to have them and put somebody on circuit. And we feel like that would be a real gut punch to some of these communities. But you have entered into this practice over the last 6 years, and you haven't been a generalist. Now, you've done a lot, but you've really developed a focus in this. That seems almost anachronistic to what you just described because you're like, everybody has general needs. They have wills that they need to move their property around, they need to do businesses, they need to do all of this stuff. But you've become known for your oil and gas expertise. And, you know, I know you won't toot your horn, so I'll do it, in the fact that you've been to the Supreme Court, that you won on cases of nuanced, obscure law that nobody understands why it would have impacted their life had it gone the opposite direction. But you've carved a very significant focus inside of a very general need. How did you do that? How did that become a reality for you?
So I would say really just for a couple reasons. One, both of them are because I'm fortunate enough for something to basically have happened to me. One of them is meeting you and Tom, right? And all of your expertise in oil and gas. And that, I mean, I'm just fortunate that worked for me in my favor too. And the other thing is where these offices are with that specific like practice area, right? That's where I am, and that's what's important to me, and I enjoy it, and all of those things. Like I've just been fortunate that has worked that way. But I think also I'm also fortunate that I grew up on a farm, and I have a family of farmers, and those are the issues that impact them. And so things like property issues and mineral rights and coal and all sorts of things like that, like I've been around that forever, like my whole life. So none of that was really like foreign to me either, which I think I was also just fortunate enough to benefit from that.
Sure.
So I think those are probably really the reasons that it's worked. And then as a firm, we're set up so well that all of those general needs can be met in those offices for those communities, even if it's not by me.
Yeah.
So that's also a big benefit to having those offices in those places.
What I think is fascinating about it is, and especially since this is for, you know, the basic business advice part of this, which, by the way, for anybody listening into this one right now, Kate and Tom, our senior partner, are going to actually be doing a separate series on oil and gas specifically. And actually later today, they're going to record their first couple episodes on that, and that'll be out on our channels as well. But what I think is fascinating from a perspective when you're talking, especially to business owners, is that you've been able to create a very successful practice in an area where maybe it wasn't going to be evident that that was going to be right up front. Because what you've described in the legal world is a market that has a lot of volume of work, but not a lot of value associated with that volume. We typically call those flat rate work, where there's a ton of things that we can do for people, but they're usually one-offs. And what you've done is you've found a way to tie a geographic network together to develop a niche focus on a valuable practice area. Maybe it doesn't have the same volume, although arguably we've done plenty of volume in that area, but you've also been able to, while meeting regular needs, create a very successful practice with the team that you now have in place over there and do a tremendous amount. And what I think I want to get at is people overlook these smaller places because they don't know that there's opportunity there. They don't see the opportunity. Have you ever felt like Harrison County has been overlooked by those that are looking to build something bigger, looking to do more? Do you ever feel like it's one of those things that's like it's too small and it just gets shoved aside and not paid attention to?
Sure. I mean, it's if you just look at the map of counties in Ohio by population, those counties are they're like pockets. Mm-hmm. It's really easy for someone who lives like around Caddis, like I do, to go to any surrounding county to somewhere bigger and do things or shop for things or look for an attorney or something like that. So I think people really want pretty often somebody who understands, probably always someone who understands them. And so that's being there and having a presence there. I think it's a lot of that, or at least really helpful to do that. But sure, like Harrison County and Monroe County, they have a lot of roads other places and to get out of them. So yeah, I would agree with what you said, that it seems like sometimes they're overlooked.
They're hidden, but
shame.
it appears, in this conversation at least, and I believe in this, there's hidden value there. Not just in being a service to people, but hidden value to creating something, creating a practice, creating a meaningful professional career, even inside of these smaller communities.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I agree.
And you've told me before, and again, this has been a while because we had a partner retreat one time and we got into the why. Why do we do this? Why do we practice? And I'm not going to put you on the spot to remember exactly what you said because you might, but it's stuck with me over the past 3 years since that retreat and since we went away. You said one of your whys was you wanted your daughters to see it was possible to be successful in a small community. Is that still true?
Sure. Yeah, that's completely true. And I think I have one more daughter since then.
Yeah.
So just adding up
just
daughters.
Keep tacking them on there.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's, if I grew up there, and if I think about like my high school class or things like that, a lot of people leave for all sorts of reasons. There's opportunities other places and they want to do something different, or, I mean, that's true for all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. But for them, I want them to feel like they have roots there, so that is not something they have to do to leave to have opportunities. So yeah, I still think that.
Do you think you're accomplishing that? I know
With
that's
them?
a hard question to ask. I know they're young.
The older two, they have a lot of opinions, so I could probably ask them and see what they think.
Yeah.
But I think so. I mean, I think they're pretty rooted.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've seen as well, and I agree with you, it's hard to go out and do this stuff on your own because it is a longer path to creating this. I mean, we were not there 6 years ago, and we've had a lot of work to do over the last 6 years of building and supporting and growing the practice to being something that it is today, and seeing your success that you're seeing with this. That is not always accessible to everybody to entering in. But what I'm encouraged about, especially as we look at the future of the firm and look at your practices and look at where we want to go, we see a viable path forward in these more rural, smaller communities, and that there is a way to meet needs there that may be worth going back to for people and worth coming back to do that. And so, do you have any other thoughts on the small communities and what opportunities lie in therein?
Well, I mean, I think it's, in my opinion, no different than anywhere else, right? It is what you make of it. Mm-hmm. And so I really do mean that I like to have space and spread out, though. So that's also something that you can get in those places that maybe you can't get other places. But I mean, I think it's what you make of it. So if you don't try, then you're missing it. Yeah,
that's good. I like that. And especially after having been in DC last week, I agree with you. I like a little bit of space. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of people in a lot of small space.
I never realize it quite as much until I go somewhere like that. And it's like, yeah, I just need something quieter every once in a while.
And not all of our people who listen to this are going to be like, yeah, I identify with that. Sure. But, for those that do, and if you're looking at the next or what opportunities exist, moving into these small communities, there are opportunities there. So... Well, thanks, Kate, for talking with me for a few minutes about this. You do, and for anybody who does have any questions or maybe in your markets or looking for somebody, your focus is oil and gas and real estate. You do complex issues there. You're often in big fights on that stuff, but you also help people negotiate leases and tangle with national companies over complex issues, as well as you have a team that just kind of is willing to catch whatever comes through the door as well.
Yep. All of that's true.
That's true.
And I'm happy to do any of it. So
that's awesome. And so they can find you on eques.law, and they can follow up if anybody does want to talk to you about anything, especially what's the benefit of making something out of what it is in small communities. So thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. And on behalf of Kate and myself, this is Chris White, and you've been listening to Basic Business Advice.